Greetings to you and welcome to this episode of Grace Podcast. I'm Timothy Muse. I'll be your host as we spend this time together today. It's a joy to be with you. I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank you for making this podcast a part of your journey. And I certainly want to thank you for being on this journey, for being courageous enough to ask the questions, look into yourself, find the places it may need some extra energy, some extra attention, and then doing it, and then pursuing it. Good for you for being here, and good for you for having the courage and the willingness to bring about this self-awareness, to bring about these questions. It's an honor to be able to walk beside you in this, to offer some piece of knowledge, wisdom, or information. If this podcast is helpful, please share it out there. Put it out there on your social media feeds. I post on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and Facebook. If you follow me or the podcasting on any one of those feeds, you're going to see these episodes. Share them. Tag me in it. Love to see where you are. If you're on one of the listening platforms, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music, follow us, give us a rating and review. Every positive rating and review tells the platform people are listening, and you'll get a notification when a new episode comes out. And if you want to reach out to me directly, GraceLifeCoaching.com. I'd love to hear from you. GraceLifeCoaching.com is the website. That's where you can get a hold of me. I really, truly would love to hear from you. GraceLifeCoaching.com. So we've been on this journey about what the end of summer can teach us as we grow. Today, our theme is going to be simple. The light is changing. If you pay attention near the end of summer, you can see it. The sun begins to set a little earlier. The morning feels slightly different. The shadows stretch a little longer. The brightness changes. Nothing happens all at once. There usually isn't one single morning when summer suddenly becomes fall. Instead, the season begins to give us clues, small signs, subtle changes, that shift in temperature or that different quality of light, that slightly earlier sunset. Nature rarely announces change with a loudspeaker. It usually whispers first. And life often works exactly the same way. Before a major change happens, there are often signs. Change in our energy, change in our interests, change in our tolerance, change in our relationships, change in what motivates us, change in what we want, changes in what we can no longer ignore. The challenge is that many of us don't notice these signals until they become impossible to overlook. So I want to talk about becoming more attentive to your own life, to those signals in your own life. Because sometimes the question isn't, what should I change? Sometimes the question is, what's already changing? Because we usually imagine change as something dramatic, something big, a resignation or a breakup or a move or a diagnosis or a major opportunity or a big decision. But those moments are often the visible result of changes that have been happening beneath the surface for a long time. A resignation is the end of the road, but you've been thinking about leaving a job. People may hear, I've decided to leave, but the decision may have begun months earlier. Maybe you started feeling drained, or your values no longer aligned with your work, or you stopped feeling challenged, or you noticed yourself becoming increasingly resentful. Maybe you found yourself thinking more frequently, I don't want to do this anymore. Those are signals. The final decision was simply the moment when the internal change became visible. Relationships can work the same way. Personal growth can work the same way. Dreams can work the same way. We change before we fully realize that we've changed. And one of the great skills of self-awareness is learning to notice those small shifts before they become crisis, right? And one of the big places to look at is your energy. One of the clearest signals your life gives you is energy. Ask yourself, what gives me energy right now? And what constantly takes energy away? Now, not every draining activity is wrong. Work can be tiring and still meaningful. Parenting can be exhausting and deeply important. Exercise can leave you physically tired while making you healthier. So we're not simply looking for everything that feels easy. We're paying attention to patterns. Maybe you used to enjoy something and now you constantly dread it. Maybe you once felt excited by a responsibility, now that leaves you depleted. Maybe you spend time with certain people and notice that you always leave feeling small or tense or discouraged. Maybe there's an activity you keep postponing even though you tell yourself it's important. That doesn't automatically mean you need to quit, but it's information. Your energy is trying to tell you something. Your body will also tell you something. Sometimes our bodies detect stress before our conscious mind does. You walk into a certain meeting and immediately your shoulders tense. You pick up your phone because it's ringing and a name appears and your stomach tightens. Sunday evening arrives and anxiety increases. This is a big thing for a lot of people, the Sunday anxiety syndrome. You think about a particular decision and you feel relief. Or you imagine saying no to something and suddenly breath comes easier. Pay attention. This doesn't mean every uncomfortable physical reaction is a command, by no means. We can feel anxious about healthy things too. Starting something meaningful can make us nervous. Growth can be uncomfortable. But repeating physical responses are worth noticing. Your body is part of your experience. It often registers stress, fear, exhaustion, or relief before your words do, before your mind does. So ask, what happens in me when I think about this? What happens in me when I engage this? What happens to me physically? What does my body do? We can be so disembodied. We can ignore what our bodies are saying in order to push through. But we want to pay attention to our bodies because our bodies know. That question can reveal a great deal about ourselves. What happens in me when I think about this? What happens in me when I think about work? What happens in me when I think about being with this person? What happens in me when I walk into this room or I answer this phone call? The body gives us signals. So does resentment. Resentment is another signal. Resentment doesn't automatically mean something else is wrong. Sometimes resentment develops because we haven't communicated clearly. Maybe you're saying yes when you want to say no. Maybe you're accepting a responsibility and secretly expect others to notice how much you're sacrificing. Maybe you're continually volunteering for things and then become angry that you're the only one doing them. Resentment can sometimes be a signal that a boundary is missing. So ask, what am I repeatedly agreeing to that I no longer want to agree to? That's an uncomfortable question, but it's useful. Maybe your resentment isn't telling you to abandon the relationship. Maybe it's telling you to have a conversation. Maybe it's telling you to stop overfunctioning. Maybe it's telling you to ask for help. Maybe it's telling you that your needs have changed. That signal matters. What you do with it requires wisdom. So notice where your resentment lies. If resentment is growing in something that it wasn't there before, pay attention to that and be courageous enough to ask the deep question, why? Why am I resenting this now? Why am I resenting this action, this conversation? Because resentment gives us a signal. Another thing that can give you a signal is paying attention to the things that you're willing to tolerate less of. Growth often changes our tolerance. Things we once accepted may become increasingly difficult to ignore. Maybe you've become less willing to tolerate disrespect, less willing to live consistently exhausted, less willing to remain silent when something matters, less willing to spend time around endless negativity, less willing to sacrifice your health for productivity, less willing to explain yourself to people determined to misunderstand you. That doesn't necessarily mean you become difficult. Sometimes it means you've become clearer. As we grow, we begin to recognize the cost we previously ignored. Late summer light reveals things differently. And sometimes maturity does the same. You see things you didn't see before. Once you see them, it's hard to pretend that you didn't. Look, you can change your interests without life being wrong. One of the greatest things about humans is that we are allowed to change. We are allowed to shift. We are allowed to grow. We sometimes feel guilty when our interests change. Something once mattered deeply, and now it doesn't. Maybe a career goal or a hobby or a social circle. We might think, what's wrong with me? Maybe nothing. People change. Experiences change us. Age changes us. Responsibilities change us. What we value at 25 may not be what we value at 55. That's not necessarily a loss. It's development. There's freedom in saying, I don't want exactly what I used to want. You don't need to remain loyal forever to every dream your younger self created. Honor who you were, but allow who you are becoming to grow as well. Allow that voice to come out. Honor who you were, but allow who you are becoming to grow and to come out of you. Because we're allowed to change. We're allowed to grow. We're allowed to shift. Another piece of information that we can gain is boredom. We often treat boredom as a problem to eliminate, but sometimes boredom is useful. It can tell us that we've stopped being challenged. Maybe you're not unhappy. Maybe everything is fine, but something feels flat. You go through the motions. You know exactly what comes next. Nothing is necessarily wrong, but nothing feels alive either. That doesn't mean you need to blow up your life. Maybe you need a new challenge. And when I talk about boredom, I'm not talking about boredom as in like sitting doing nothing, but you're doing what you're doing, but it's just boring. It's like, this is boring. So maybe you need a new challenge. Maybe you don't need to blow up your life. Maybe you need to add a new skill or a different goal or a creative project or a new conversation or a change in routine. Boredom can sometimes be your mind asking, is there more? Is there more to life? Is there more to this relationship than this? Is there more to work than just this? Listen before you dismiss it. Listen before you dismiss it. And notice what you keep thinking about. Another clue is recurring thoughts. What ideas keep returning? What possibilities keep coming back? What conversations do you keep imagining? What change have you been thinking about for months? Sometimes we wait for complete certainty before taking our own thoughts seriously. But if an idea keeps returning, it deserves attention. Again, attention is not the same as immediate action. You can explore thoughts without committing to it. You can ask, why does this thought keep coming back? Why do I keep thinking about this? Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's fantasy. Maybe it's genuine desire. Maybe it's that there's a need in you that's being ignored. The point is not to obey every thought. The point is to become curious about patterns. Patterns matter. And if a thought pattern keeps coming back over and over again, then be curious about it. Where's it coming from? Why am I having it? What does it mean? Be curious about those things. Be curious about those thoughts that just keep coming back over and over again. And understand, this is a tricky one, that discomfort can actually be growth. Not every uncomfortable feeling is a sign that you should leave. Sometimes discomfort means you're exactly where you need to be. Public speaking may not be the best thing for you, but it's something that you stretch into. A difficult conversation may make you feel uncomfortable because honesty requires courage. Exercise may feel uncomfortable because your body is adapting. Starting a new business can feel uncomfortable because uncertainty is real. So how do you tell the difference between unhealthy discomfort and growth discomfort? One useful question you can use is, does this discomfort make me smaller, or is it helping me become stronger? Unhealthy situations often make us increasingly diminished. We become fearful, disconnected, chronically depleted, less like ourselves. Growth challenges may be more uncomfortable, but somewhere underneath the discomfort offers a meaning. There's a meaning to it. Possibility, alignment, a sense that this matters. Not always exciting, but with purpose. That distinction can help us. I'm feeling uncomfortable right now. Is this uncomfort making me smaller, making me diminish? Or is this an uncomfort that I'm working with because I'm going into something bigger? I'm growing. That's really an important thing. Another important clue is restlessness. Have you ever just felt restless without knowing why? Nothing is dramatically wrong, but you know something doesn't fit anymore. You can't quite name it. You find yourself thinking, I need something different. Restlessness can be frustrating because it doesn't immediately tell us what to do, but perhaps its job is simply to get our attention. You don't always need to solve restlessness immediately. Maybe you need to explore it, journal about it, talk with someone you trust, spend time away from your usual environment. Ask what part of your life feels misaligned. Sometimes clarity comes only after we stop demanding an immediate answer and sit with that restlessness, sit with that uneasiness, sit with that discomfort. It's really, really important. Taking us back to the environment, the light changes before the calendar does. Again, think about late summer. We're still here in August. The calendar may still say August, but you sense that something is changing. This is important because we often wait for external permission to acknowledge internal change. We wait until the job becomes unbearable, until the relationship explodes, until our health forces us to slow down, until burnout becomes severe, until someone else finally says, you can't keep doing this. What if we listened sooner? What if we responded to the earlier signals? Maybe change could be more intentional, less dramatic, and less reactive. You don't have to wait until something completely breaks before making an adjustment. Sometimes wisdom means responding while the signals are still whispering. So ask yourself, what is my life telling me? What is my life telling me right now? Not what should my life look like? Not what do other people expect? Not what did I plan 5 years ago? What is your actual life telling you now? Maybe it's telling you you need more rest. You need a challenge. You need help. You need better boundaries. You need more connection. You need less noise. You need to take your health more seriously. You need to stop postponing something important. You need to forgive or speak or listen. You need to simplify. You need to begin. You need to end. Or perhaps you need to stay where you are and appreciate what you have. Not every signal is telling you to leave. Sometimes your life is telling you, stop searching for something else and become more present here. That's also worth hearing. So I'd encourage you to think about your signals. Think about the signals you have in your life. Think about 4 quadrants in your life, 4 different signals that you're getting every day. We get them every day. And when we start paying attention to them, then we can start to see where we're at more fully. The first one is your energy. Where do you feel more energized? What brings you energy? And where do you feel completely or constantly depleted? What drains you? Where's your energy at? What brings you energy? What depletes your energy? That's a signal. Your emotions. What emotions have been showing up repeatedly? Frustration, excitement, fear, boredom, hope, resentment, peace. Your emotions are signals. Pay attention to them. The third one is your thoughts. What ideas or concerns keep returning? What have I been thinking about for weeks or months or years? That's a signal. And your behavior. What am I avoiding? What am I moving toward? What am I procrastinating on? What am I doing more of? Look for the patterns. Don't overinterpret every small detail. Just notice. Notice the patterns. What themes appear? You may discover that your life has been speaking more clearly than you realize. And if you can't see that, maybe you need to ask someone who knows you. Sometimes other people notice our changes before we do. A trusted friend might say, you don't seem excited about that anymore. Or every time you talk about this, you lighten up. Or you've been exhausted for months. Or you seem happier lately. Pay attention to the people who know you well and want what's best for you. Look, not everybody deserves influence, but trusted people can be mirrors. They may see patterns you miss because you're living inside them every day. You don't have to obey their interpretation, but consider it, especially if they love you and want what's best for you. Because not every signal requires a major decision. This is important. You may recognize something needs changed and immediately assume you need dramatic action. That's not necessarily the case. Maybe the signal is telling you to adjust your schedule, not quit your job. Maybe you need a difficult conversation, not end a relationship. Maybe you need 2 evenings free each week, not just 1. Maybe you need to take a class, not change your careers. Oftentimes we think in extremes. Stay exactly the same or change everything. But many meaningful changes happen through small adjustments. Experiment, try something, create a little space, see what happens. Growth is incremental. And look here, my friends, give yourself permission to change your mind. Truly. Sometimes we stay stuck because we publicly commented or committed to an identity. We told everyone, this is what I'm going to do. This is my plan. This is who I am. Then we change. And embarrassment keeps us trapped. We think, what will people say? Probably something. People always have opinions. But living a life that no longer fits so other people won't be surprised is a very expensive price to pay. You are allowed to say, I believe that then. I see it differently now. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to believe something 5 minutes ago, get new information, and change your mind. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to grow. People may not want you to. People may like you exactly where you are, but you are allowed to change your mind. And don't be afraid of changing the version of yourself. Sometimes the hardest part of change is not external. It's recognizing that we are changing. We like consistency. We like knowing who we are. But growth almost guarantees that some things will shift. Your values will deepen. Your priority may change. Your boundaries may strengthen. Your definition of success may evolve. That's not something to fear. The person you are today does not have to be the permanent version you are still becoming. That's the whole point of growth. So don't be afraid of changing the version of you. You're allowed to do that. It is perfectly acceptable. As we close out today, think about this. The sun is going down. You notice the light is softer than it was a month ago. Maybe you can't point to the exact day when it changed, but you know it did. Something is different. That doesn't mean anything is wrong. It simply means the season is moving. And maybe something is moving in your life too. Maybe you felt restless. Maybe your energy has changed. Maybe something that once mattered doesn't matter quite as much. Maybe an old dream is fading. Maybe a new one is quietly appearing. Maybe you feel more tired than usual. Maybe you feel more courageous than you used to. Maybe you are finally less willing to tolerate something you've tolerated for years. Don't panic. Get curious. Ask yourself, what is changing in me? What is this trying to teach me? What deserves my attention? What adjustments might help? And above all, what is my life trying to tell me right now? You don't have to have all the answers today. Sometimes awareness is the first step. Notice the light. Notice the change. Notice yourself. Because life often whispers before it shouts. And the more carefully you listen to the whisper, the less often you'll need a crisis to get your attention. So until we come together again, keep growing, keep listening, and remember, change rarely arrives all at once. Often it begins as a quiet shift in the light. And wisdom is learning to notice before the season has completely changed. That's what I got for you for today, my friends. If it's helpful, please share it out there. Put it out there on your social media feeds. I post on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and Facebook. If you're on one of the listening platforms, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music, follow us, give us a rating and review. And if you want to reach out to me directly, GraceLifeCoaching.com is the website. I would love to hear from you. I really, truly would. At Grace Life Coaching, we want you to be the best you.